The Plymouth Superbird and Dodge Daytona, close siblings and key rivals. This is the video about two titans of speed, about game-changing era of NASCAR, about the time of innovation. These weren't just cars. They were flying machines with huge wings and pointed nose cones that made them look more like rockets than cars. These two are the peak of Aero wars, when power met performance and style battled engineering. These two changed American automotive history. Back in the late 1960s, NASCAR was probably at its peak, which all culminated with the so-called Aero wars. Suddenly, monstrous big block V8 engines weren't enough to win the race anymore. Engineers needed to figure out how to increase top speed, and, of course, the next logical step was to improve aerodynamics. Chrysler was desperate to end Ford's dominance, so its most prominent muscle cars started receiving massive aerodynamic upgrades. Ford responded soon enough, but up to these days, the twin titans from Chrysler, the Plymouth Superbird, and Dodge Daytona remain the most dominant NASCAR cars of the era. Of course, both models are best known for their massive body upgrades, primarily pointed nose cones and massive rear wings. Today, they are among the most valuable and collectible muscle cars ever built, because even though they were sold as street cars, the actual numbers are very limited. Combine that with a racing pedigree and some of the most extreme stylings in American automotive history, and you won't be surprised that even seven-figure prices at auctions have become pretty much a regular thing. What makes them so special? What are the shared features? What are the key differences? These are the questions we are about to answer in this video. So be sure to stay until the end because the best part is coming. It seems natural to start with shared features and similarities between the two models because there are plenty of them. Both models were imagined as Chrysler's Aero warriors, built to push speed limits through massive aerodynamic upgrades. And the two models shared base design characteristics. Daytona was introduced first based on the Charger. Plymouth followed with a design based on the Roadrunner. Charger and Roadrunner have so much in common. Even though the Charger is a more upscale car, the two models both ride on the B-body platform, with mostly the same mechanics. The Charger features a slightly longer wheelbase, but that difference is about an inch, so we are not sure if we should have pointed it out at all. Powertrain is the same, with range-topping variants featuring the famous Hemi 426 with 425 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque, while more basic variants of both models were equipped with the good old 440 V8, available with either 375 or 390 horsepower. There's one more thing in common: racing success. The Daytona came first and made an immediate impact in 1969, becoming the first car to break 200 miles per hour in NASCAR, with Buddy Baker behind the wheel. The Superbird followed in 1970 and confirmed Chrysler's status as the most dominant force in American racing. The two cars were so fast, so much ahead of the competition, that NASCAR had to ban them after 1970 to save the competition by implementing new rules that limited engine sizes and, more importantly, outlawed those extreme aerodynamic modifications. Which leads to the styling similarities. The Charger and Roadrunner already featured similar proportions, so these aerodynamic upgrades made them look even closer. For someone who is not a die-hard muscle car fan, the two models look pretty much the same, and it takes a second or even third look to notice exclusive details. That's why we're going to focus on differences more to help you all understand relation between the two models. Obviously, their primary purpose was racing, but to compete in NASCAR, you need a car that's sold as a production model, meaning customers can walk into a dealership and buy one. You may imagine how funny dealers looked back in the day with those crazy designs on their lots. Despite the impressive performance, the two models were actually a pretty tough sell. Regular buyers weren't particularly interested, so many of these sat on dealership floors for such a long time that sometimes they needed to be repainted and modified just to move inventory. Eventually, only 503 Daytonas were sold, while the Superbird was much more successful, with 1,920 to 2,783 units sold, depending on the source we can refer to. Anyway, as we already established, the two models featured the same kinds of upgrades that made them look almost the same, but the devil is in the details. So let's take a little bit closer look to check the differences. You'll be surprised to see how much difference between the two models is actually there. Starting at the front, the most prominent detail of both models is the nose cone. But it's different. On the Superbird, it features a grille located beneath the leading edge of the nose spoiler, while in the case of Daytona, it's positioned on the leading edge of the spoiler. Daytona's nose is a bit smaller and features finer indentations. But despite the significant aerodynamic impact, it revealed a big overheating problem on street-legal models, as there was simply not enough fresh air coming inside during stop-and-go traffic. Dodge tried to solve this issue with a triple-core radiator, but without much success. The next stop would be fender scoops, and once again, the differences are minor, but important. The Superbird features scoops that are mostly decorative, without any openings underneath, though some experts speculated that they were also intended for airflow. The Daytona, on the other hand, has fender scoops that are actually functional, with actual openings at the top. Those who were lucky enough to take a close look at both models also discovered an interesting difference in the hood pin lanyard fittings, where the Daytona's lanyards attached to the top, while the Superbirds are mounted underneath, attached to a cowl beneath the hood. We already mentioned that Charger was a more upscale proposal compared to the Roadrunner, and the same approach was transferred to these two NASCAR race wars in the way that, while the Daytona had wind deflectors affixed to the A-pillar with adhesive, the Superbird came with a way more rudimentary approach, where they were screwed into the A-pillar. Another noticeable difference is in the gas tank filler placement, as the Daytona features the Charger's racing-style filler positioned at the top. The Superbird, on the other hand, carried on with Roadrunner's not particularly convenient and practical solution, where the filler is placed behind the license plate. Finally, there's the roof, one of the biggest differences between the two models. As mentioned, the Daytona came first, and guys from Plymouth were in a bit of a rush to launch the counterpart. And in such a hurry, some parts of the car needed to be figured out quickly. Plymouth removed the original sail panels and installed a flat roof section with inserted plug. But there was no time to refine the welds, so they rather covered them with a vinyl top and added a couple of decorative pieces to hide imperfections. The whole process was much simpler with Daytona. Not only that it came out first, but significantly fewer vehicles were built, which allowed Dodge engineers to do the welding with more precision and make a few more additional modifications on the back window, including unique moldings. With all due respect to the iconic nose cones, the most prominent aerodynamic upgrade on both models was that massive rear wing. It's beyond huge and looks pretty much the same, but only until you take a close look. Then you realize that there is a difference in angle, height, and degree of tilt. When compared side by side, different angle is the first thing to notice. On one hand, the Daytona features a much steeper angle, while the Superbird's wing is tilted further back. Legend says that the difference wasn't the outcome of some kind of engineering, but rather resulted from the stylists who were involved in the design of the Superbird. They made several modifications, and the difference is pretty clear. The rear wing design difference was part of many elaborations, and some of them, like Paul Hurd, one of the biggest experts on these two Aero heroes, noticed that the Daytona was actually faster. The wind tunnel testing showed a 3-mile-per-hour difference, and it's believed that the wing was the factor that made the speed gap. Because while Daytona was designed entirely through wind tunnel testing, the Superbird suffered from stylistic changes that, turns out, negatively impacted its aerodynamics. As mentioned, the two models were based on the B-body platform, and therefore, interiors were also very similar with so many shared components. The dashboard looked similar, just like the seating and the overall layout, but there were a few noticeable differences. For example, there's the radio. The 1969 Charger Daytona featured a thumbwheel unit that adjusts up and down, while the newer Superbird came with a more conventional and more convenient round knob that turns left and right. A 4-speed manual was standard on both models, but the shifter was different. The Daytona was introduced in 1969, so it featured a classic round ball at the top of the shifter. By 1970, Chrysler released the iconic pistol grip shifter, and the Superbird was actually the first one to feature it, and that's probably the biggest difference between the two models, at least when we talk about what's going on the inside. This will be our take on the two Aero Wars legends. We hope we helped you understand similarities and differences between Daytona and Superbird better. If you think we missed some important features, be sure to write it in the comments. Your contribution will be greatly appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe and help our channel grow. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.